Thank you. Thank you for coming. My name is Scott Greene. I was born in Denver, Colorado, and I moved to San Francisco to go to undergraduate school and lived there for about 12 years. Met my wife, and we moved here about 25 years ago. So we've lived in New Mexico for about 25 years now. Anyway, so this is kind of a selection of my work. I think it kind of a fairly random selection, but it's, you know. Anyway, my work deals with a lot of environmental issues, and I was listening to Nancy Rubin talk about her work. She's a sculptor, does these big constructions of found objects. And she described her work as beautiful puzzles, and that kind of stuck with me. I think that kind of fits with my work to a certain extent. There's a lot of layering of paint, there's a lot of layering of coded information. It's not hidden information, it's all pretty accessible, but it all has meanings to it. Historical references, autobiographical references, kind of a wide range of ideas and influences. So I have a friend also that wrote about a series of paintings that I did recently, the Course of the Empire that's behind there, and he described my work as being kind of a combination of the sacred and whatever. And I really like that. I mean, I think that probably describes my work better than anything, because the whatever I think is easy to pick out. I think you can see that in either the debris or the junk, or it's headers. It's just stuff around. Satellite dishes. Yeah, tons of stuff. And that's kind of the whatever. The sacred's a little more difficult to talk about, or a little more difficult to define. It has something to do with tradition and the sublime. My just observing the world. There's a lot of different layers of that. So I think it really does come down to kind of a combination of this high stuff and low stuff. Anyway, so I started working with automobile-related imagery probably 25, 30 years ago. And that's when I really started to really do my work in earnest. And it was, I just saw the car as something to hang the paint on, and so I started painting cars. And gradually kind of took on more meaning as I went, and kind of anthropomorphic qualities of the car, and then the context, what the car is driving in, and the atmosphere. And all of that started to become just as important as the focus on the car. And so all of these ideas have gradually built up over a long period of time. I've kind of held on to most everything and just keep adding to it. So my painting Mistletoe here, I was walking in Culver City, and I was walking past a garage, and I saw a big pile, a tangle of these headers, and it looked like a twisted root, a silver glistening chrome root. And I thought, oh, that'd make a nice tree. So try to form it into a tree. And when I did that, I felt like I was making kind of a new sort of species of tree, maybe a drought-tolerant hybrid tree. And I had already been working on some other tree imagery, old dead trees that are called snags, and a snag is a tree that becomes a habitat for new life. And so I thought, well, I've got mistletoe growing on trees outside in the yard, so I've got a piece of mistletoe and stuck it on there and tried to work it as naturalistically as I could. And it's got some soda cans as the fruit. So I mean, I think that there's a certain element of humor in my work that probably goes back to more of the autobiographical side of what I do, and that my family is in the entertainment business, musicians and performers and comedians, and so somebody like Lenny Bruce or Richard Pryor, George Carlin is about as big an influence on the way that I think about things as Philip Guston or Bruegel, or it really does have a lot to do with how I mix up the imagery and my choices of what to put into a painting. I guess I really appreciate work like Lenny Bruce's because it's biting social criticism, but it's satirical, it's funny, and he was able to kind of get away with saying some pretty difficult things just because he was just hilarious. So I relate to that in a big way. Let me see. We'll talk about, I'll just kind of go around and talk about some different paintings here. Snafu, which is situation normal, all effed up, which is mil-speak, military slang for, situation normal. And I was inspired to do this painting from our irrigation ditch, because we had a family that kind of set up, and it really was a family. Set up a camp in our irrigation ditch, and they had their suitcases, and it was very well organized, and they were living there, and I don't know for how long, but so I kind of saw that as well. Here's a scene where people have to make do with what's around, and so that's kind of what that's about. And I see this painting as part of a tradition in Vanitas still life. The objects are closer up. The landscape is really kind of set back. It's more of just a context for the objects. And the flame, basically talking about the ephemeral quality of life, that things pass. And they had to get out of the ditch too because we had to run the water. So, it really was that. So yeah, it's kind of a difficult, but at the same time, kind of poignant. There's certain things that I do in the objects, like the suitcase. I kind of read that as a cornucopia of sorts. So there's things that are going through my mind as I'm painting. And in my process is kind of a gradual building, and I don't really start off with a very clear drawing. It's actually pretty loose, and things kind of gradually show themselves in the painting. I'll make an association with one thing and give me an idea to put something else in. So that's kind of how I work. The challenging part is to make them look like they were there to begin with. And, if I'm adding stuff in the late stages of a painting, somehow they have to integrate with everything else. So there's a lot of attention to edges and stuff like that. That's kind of that. The series that I did over here, which is 5 panels, sorry, and it was inspired by Thomas Cole's The Course of Empire, and it was a really great project because it's a really big idea, and it's an idea that really kind of, it took me out of working on a single canvas and having to kind of deal with a lot of different ideas all at once that are all related. Thomas Cole was a sublime painter, American painter, landscape painter, a contemporary of Albert Bierstadt and Frederick Church. And I guess I'm kind of playing on the idea that a lot of the sublime painters, they wouldn't put elements of the human touch in their or any kind of human elements in their paintings at all. I mean, they wanted to be able to see the landscape as this just almost religious, euphoric vision of an idyllic landscape. It's kind of hard to see stuff like that now because we know that we're having such an impact on our environment that I can't really ignore that. I kind of, in my work, I invite the human element into that. But I still want to hold on to some sense of that sublime, that quality of nature, so that your eye penetrates the sky, so that it goes into form, so that you really get a sense of the experience of actually seeing something, some vision of some sort. So I have Peace Offering is the first panel, is on the upper left over here, and it's kind of a mashup of history, false history. You've got paleontology and archaeology, basically kind of denying certain beliefs in terms of like what came when, and so you've got Spanish Armada with guns blazing in all directions, a Brachiosaurus looking at a little boat that's crossing over to land, and there's a figure with a halo and some sheep on it, which is presumably Jesus. So they're all existing at the same time. It's a very neat composition. Everything's very, very controlled, but it's completely false. It's a completely false history, and so it's I think a statement on our willingness to kind of ignore scientific fact. Anyway, so that's the first panel. In Thomas Cole's was the Savage State, and so that's my version of the Savage State. The next panels below I titled that Manifest. Thomas Cole had it was the Arcadian State, and I kind of skipped over that because it just doesn't really ring true. I don't think there really ever was an Arcadian State. People have been, on the plains and across the country here for 10,000 years, impacting the environment, and it was never that way. It's a false, another false history. Manifest. This is basically I took up Manifest Destiny as the next stage in the development of the empire, and so you've got a train that's period piece. About the time that Thomas Cole would have been painting his painting. Instead, this is kind of the big money grab, the big land grab, the move westward, and development, or the country basically being founded on the backs of slavery and taken away from people, and the plundering of basically everything that was on the land. So the train's kind of running off the rails here. Probably the most serious painting in the bunch, but it's kind of there's an element of truth. It's not a very factual scene, but I think there's a lot of truth in there. This third panel occupies the centerpiece of what Thomas Cole called the consummation, and it was kind of where everything came together. The empire was its full, functioning. It was the high point, and our high point is nuclear testing, especially here in New Mexico. I think that we have a special relationship to the A-bomb here. So the explosions are dominating the natural landscape, and the two-way road is basically it is a two-way road between security and devastation. That's kind of what that's about. The little gallon jug on the far right is a trucker bomb. Does anybody know what a trucker bomb is? Yes. Yeah. When a trucker is a little too lazy to find a bathroom, they'll just kind of go in a jug and then leave it on the side of the road. So there's kind of the
Welcome to New Mexico.
Yes, our contemporary human relationship with the land at this point. Below that is eminent domain. I titled that eminent domain. That was, I think, a state of devastation for Cole's series, and that was he had a battle, and everything was being destroyed and lots of fire. And instead I decided to go with a landscape where everything is basically used and contained and pulled out from the earth. So you've got a sulfurous river running through there, and gas and oil tanks all filled. A building that's being obliterated by a plastic bag, and the sky is kind of there's a quality to the sky that you know there's something in it. You might not be able to see it, but you know something's there. And in place of a bird, we have a drone. So I mean, basically, that's kind of the idea. In eminent domain, the title is, it refers to a public taking of a private land and for public use, and this is really kind of more the reverse of that. It's more a private taking of public land for private profit. And then the last panel is Desolation, was Thomas Cole's title, and mine is Shelf Life. And basically, you can see that some radical shifts have happened here. And you've got a cell tower disguised as a palm tree, so from a more tropical environment, resting on an ice floe. I'm not sure where that would be. The blue containers that are inside the melting, the cave that's in the melting ice, are the WIP site containers, the Waste Isolation Pilot Program that we have in southern New Mexico. And it's actually not functioning now, but I used to drive down to Roswell and I'd see these containers on the truck as I'm driving down there. And apparently they're very big containers, and there's like a 55-gallon drum in the center of it. And the idea was that they could have these containers and they would withstand a big car accident and they wouldn't leak. So they're there and they're buried in the salt mine. So somehow they've managed to get here. So things are really off in this painting. There's a little island of plastic and debris, and there's a pillow in it, which is kind of a recurring theme in a lot of my paintings, that symbolizes comfort and comfort, home. And so there's really no need for that anymore. And a black spot in the sky. And I wasn't really sure where I was going to go with that. I thought of it as kind of a black hole, or maybe a planet, or just a big blemish. And so, but that's my course of the empire. So let me see. Kind of a lot of iconography going here. Big Dish Candy Mountains was inspired by the hobo song Big Rock Candy Mountains, where you could go and everything was, just beautiful. Cigarettes grew on trees, and lemonade flowed in the river, and there was never a short-handled shovel, which is, I think, really, that line always struck me as really kind of amazing, because it's like, well, a short-handled shovel is like, that'd be really hard to dig with. That would kill your back. And I was working with satellite dishes at the time when I had the idea, and towers that were studded with satellite dishes. The satellite dish represented communication technology, and to have so many satellite dishes all over the place and still being unable to really communicate very well just seemed right. So here's a magical place, an imaginary place where things are great because everybody's watching TV, and it all looks good.
Need a few more.
Yeah. Yes. So let me see what else I talk about here. Ships of State painting. This is one of my out of a series of Ships of State, and basically talking about what represents the state and in the form of a ship. And this is a frigate, which is a very heavily armed ship. It's got all sorts of iconography in it that communication again, and religious symbols, and debris, shooting in multiple directions at once, and basically kind of working as a an envoy to the rest of the world. This is our culture. We're bringing this to you. So that's kind of the basic idea. Jeff. Yeah.
I really painted all these.
Yeah. Well, Jeff came up with you know the whole that term that I was talking. I don't know if you were here earlier, but yeah, no, it's where you know it's the sacred and the whatever, and it's like that's just beautiful. You know. Thank you. So yeah, that's pretty much what I do. Is there any questions or anything? That's sensible.
I actually have a lot of questions and comments, and I actually live in Las Cruces where I'm painting quite a bit too. And I came up for the opening. I saw Scott. I have a complex relationship with Scott's paintings, which is all off kind of Facebook, which is good and bad because sometimes Facebook, you know, the paintings don't hold up when you see them. So I got here early to really look at the paintings, and they're really fantastic. They're really freshly painted, and I think that's where I mean I could really talk about these paintings because I thought about them, and I thought about them when I threw Albuquerque driving up here with the sort of apocalyptic landscape of Albuquerque, and there's really something about the West that are very different from, you know, surrealism. They don't feel at all surreal. They feel factual to me because they're contemporary and they're rooted in reality. The symbolism is very deliberate. I'm sure that there's things that you elaborate and embroider onto in the later stages, but being on the edge of the world down there in Las Cruces, where, you know, I think if you drive an hour, you will see buffaloes heading off the edge of the world and trains. I just think there's a lot here, and when I heard you say sacred and whatever, I think the sacred is in the beauty of the paint and the colors and the, for lack of a better word, the formal obsession and the lust for paint and the music, the deep music there. If that wasn't here, these would be less rich, but it's like a novel, you know, and that's what I love in really good painting is that it's dense and it's layered. It is truly layered. So anyway, enough. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, I think light definitely plays into it because the quality of light will inspire a painting. You know, that will drive me through. You know.
Yeah, I mean, looking at that painting over there, that's the blue, that smoky blue right next to the hard edge of the fire, and it's gorgeous. I mean, the colors are really terrific. So I've said enough. I'll stop.
Well, I mean, they really do belong to a tradition, and I think when I was working on that painting, I had just gotten back from San Francisco and saw the really great Turner exhibition. And I've seen Turner exhibitions, I saw the Tate and one of them. I mean, they've always knocked me out, but it was really amazing because it was, you know, just to go from that and then to walk into the studio, it's like, wow, you know, because he's always been an influence on the way that I work, and you know, to have it so fresh in my mind, really kind of, you know, pushed it.
You know, one thing that I sort of saw in here tonight as you were talking, and I never thought about this painter, is Tiepolo, because, you know, all the, you know, looking up and seeing the swirling skies and the smokes and the smoke and the things coming together and falling apart. I never thought of Tiepolo, but when I look at that, the train painting, it almost feels like those swirling forces and people coming together and falling apart. And really, it's wild.
Any other questions?
Mazel.
Congratulations. Now you drink wine.
Yeah.